40% cap on international student numbers in Australia? Well, luckily not. Government has rejected the claims that they will be putting 40% cap on international students number in Australia. But they are still intending to bring this cap or limit on international student numbers from the 1st of January 2025. From calling it a national treasure to putting cap on international students number, how we have come this far in less than 2 years. Let's have a look. So when pandemic happened in 2020, the borders were shut and obviously international students couldn't make it to Australian shores. So there was a huge decline in number of international students and migrants coming to Australia during that time. And in those dark times, everyone was crying for international students, from university sector to hospitality and other places where they do part-time work. And I was in Australia during that time, so I can tell that there were many businesses who were struggling to find workers in order to get the economy going. But luckily, the borders reopened in late 2021 for international students. And after a pause of couple of years, there were many international students who were interested to study in Australia, and they came back in large numbers over the next 2 years. And thanks to some of those government policies that included subsidizing the student visa fee and increase of temporary graduate visa timeframes, that encouraged more applicants to apply from overseas to come to Australia for studies. But come 2024, international students are finding themselves in the midst of this political debate that they are the reason for creating this housing crisis and cost of living pressures. Now, before we jump into other discussions, let's understand what this proposed cap is. Basically, government is planning to introduce a cap on each Australian educational institute on how many international students that they can enroll in. Now, for those people who don't know, there is already a cap on each education provider here in Australia that they cannot enroll more than certain number of international students in Australia. But the government now wants to cap these numbers further. The new numbers of this cap has not been finalized or decided yet, but a couple of weeks back there were reports that they were planning to bring in around 40% cap on international student numbers based on the data from 2019. But for now, the government has rejected those claims, and the Minister of Education has said that they are not proposing to put such numbers, but he did not comment it on what the actual numbers might be. At the time of shooting this video, which is 15th of August 2024, there is no exact date or number of cap on international students that has been decided yet. However, we do know that the government is proposing to bring this from the 1st of January 2025. So you can expect something happening between now in the next few months to know exactly what these numbers will be. And obviously we'll keep you posted as soon as we have an update on that. And you might be wondering how the government is planning to introduce this change. Now, after budget this year, the government introduced a new bill in the parliament. The bill is named as Education Services for Overseas Student Amendment Quality and Integrity Bill 2024. Now, if this bill passes the parliament, it gives powers to the minister to put cap on international student numbers based on courses, location, and individual institutions. It also gives the power to minister to pause the registration for new courses and for new institutions, and give them a power to automatically suspending and cancelling specific courses. There were other things included in this amendment as well, but these are the three main highlighted things. But the main one obviously was regarding the cap on international student numbers, because it gives the power to minister to decide on what these cap numbers might look like. And you might also be wondering what's the status of this bill so far. So this bill has currently passed the House of Representatives. Now in the next stage, it will be debated in the Senate. Now if this bill passes the Senate, we are likely to see the changes suggested in the bill come into effect sometime in the future. Now obviously this bill has got a strong reaction from industry stakeholders that includes universities, vocational education, private institutions, and other stakeholders in the international education industry. Obviously all these stakeholders involved in international education, they are opposing this bill and asking government to not to introduce any caps on international student numbers. But the government isn't keen to back down either, and there are few reasons why they want to do that. Now, number one is housing crisis. You might have heard about that Australia is going through a very difficult housing crisis at the moment. It's not easy for Australians to find houses to buy or to rent either as well. And believe it or not, but most of it has been blamed toward international students, which if you look at some of the research conducted does not suggest that. Obviously, migration could be one part of the puzzle, but there are many other factors such as lack of housing supply and lower approvals of the housing developments in Australia. So basically, we are building less homes and it's getting a longer time to get the approvals for houses to be built. That has nothing to do with international students. Apart from that, there is a huge cost of living pressure here in Australia. I have been living in Australia for around 18 years, and I can tell from my own experience that the cost of living in Australia is out of hand. As an example, last week I went and bought 3 items from the supermarket. That included 1 kilo of bananas, 1 box of cherry and 1 small box of strawberries. That costed me more than $24. And that's a stark contrast of what used to be, let's say, 5-6 years ago. I personally think it has a lot to do with a corporate greed than just blaming it on international students. So these are the 2 major reasons, but government also says that there is an issue with the quality and integrity about Australian education system, that some education providers are not doing the right thing, which to extent I certainly agree that there are some education providers out there who might be bringing some bad name to the Australian education system, and they definitely need to be weeded out. But there are obviously many others who do the right thing as well. So in my opinion, it's not fair for those people who are doing the right thing. So putting cap on international student numbers for those people who are doing the right thing is not fair. Now, after all this explanation, you might be wondering now what impact it will have on students, Australian international education, and Australian economy in general. So if this proposed cap come into effect, here are some of the impacts you will see if you are a student. Number 1 will be higher competition. Of course, there will be less number of places available for you to apply. And if there are a lot of people planning to apply for the same place, well, you can expect to have a higher competition. And it's a possibility that some good students might miss out on this. The second thing is increased tuition fee. Now, universities are already warning that to cover up the cost, they'll have to put their prices for the tuition fee higher, which obviously is not a positive thing for students. Now, as you can expect, that there will be fewer courses and institutions available for international students to apply. If the cap comes into play, there is a chance that the universities may not be offering certain courses, or some institution might just have to close their doors because it might not be sustainable for them to do that. Cap on international students means that there will be delay on infrastructure upgrades, as international education is a huge boost to the Australian economy and to the universities as well. You can expect that if they're getting less student numbers, it will mean less revenue, which in turn will mean less upgrades for their infrastructure. And that will also bring some poor experience for the local students as well, because what universities will do to cut the cost is they will make the class sizes larger, and the delay in infrastructure will also impact the local students. Now, generally talking about Australian education providers, there will be huge loss of the revenue for them, but the major concern is regarding the job cuts. Now, Universities Australia chief has already warned that there could be a loss of jobs. Up to 14,000 jobs could be at stake if these caps come into effect. And broadly speaking, you could see closing down of some institutions, especially independent providers, and there will be less money allocated for the research by the Australian universities. What impact it could have on Australian economy? The job cuts from universities and private institutions will have significant impact on Australian economy. Some are even predicting that it can lead Australia to actual recession. And in general, there will be impact on travel, hospitality, and few other sectors where international students do part-time work. Overall, to sum up the video, I would say that there may be some need for strengthening some of the processes and bringing some alignment to the student numbers, but putting a hard cap on international student numbers may not be the right way to go, as it can lead toward massive layoffs by the Australian university sector and huge loss for some of those sectors which rely on international students for finding the workers. What happens in reality will remain to be seen. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts regarding this cap on international student numbers in the comment section below. And if you are an international student who's planning to study in Australia, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we bring you regular updates like this one and lot more other information that you will find useful. If you are planning to study in Australia, you should know the classroom differences between your home country and in Australia. To know that, check this video here, where I explain about some Australian classroom differences you need to know. So click that video there and I'll see you there.